umaga sa ating lahat, and I am welcoming you all to our Group D1 webinar entitled Inclusive Education in the Philippines, Assessing the Implementation of the Republic Act number 11650. So I am Jermela S. Mariga, and I will be your host and MC for today's webinar. So before we formally begin, let us call on Mr. Amer Esmail for an invocation.
وقال ربكم آمين رب العالمين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم اهدنا الصراط المستقيم اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Amir. And now, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the people who made this possible. First, our teacher, Dr. Cecilia Baroga, for her guidance in approving our proposal. Thank you, ma'am. To all our classmates and participants who join us today, we see you and we appreciate your time. And of course, to the entire Group D1 team, you worked so hard to prepare this webinar. Let's give ourselves a silent round of applause. Now, let me briefly share what you will gain by the end of this session. We have 3 objectives. So first, you will understand what is RA 11650 is, and more importantly, who are the learners with disabilities, or what we call LWD. Second, you will identify the major challenges in establishing inclusive learning resources centers, or what we call ILRC. And third, you will assess the adequacy of the government resources such as the budget, training, and technology. So now, to help us achieve these objectives, we have 3 excellent speakers today. Our first speaker is Ms. Kristen May T. Sicoban. She holds a degree in accounting technology and currently serves as an administrative assistant at the Department of Health Regional Office 12. She will be discussing the background of the Republic Act number 11650 and define who are the learners with disabilities are. And our second speaker is Mr. Daniel Oslaud B. Ontong. He is a computer engineering graduate and currently works as an LTO Officer 1 at the Office of the City Treasurer in the Cotabato City. He will walk us through the major challenges in establishing ILRCS. And for our third speaker is Mr. John Algen P. Poblete. He is a registered nurse by background and currently serves as a logistic officer in the Armed Forces of the Philippines. He will talk about the adequacy of the budget, teacher training, and assistive technologies. Please give them your full attentions because they have prepared well for you. Now, to guide our discussion, our webinar will be answering 3 specific questions. Question number 1, what is Republic Act number 11650? Who are the LWDs and what are the key provisions? Question number 2, what are the major challenges in establishing ILRCs? Number 3, how adequate are the budget, training, and technology? So please take note, everyone. Now, to finally answer our question number 1, let us all welcome our first speaker, Ms. Kristen May Sicoban. Ms. Sicoban holds a degree in accounting technology and currently serves as an administrative assistant at the Department of Health Regional Office 12. Please join me welcome Ms. Kristen May Sicoban.
Thank you, Ma'am Jermela, and good day everyone. I am Kristen May T. Sicoban, and I will answer our first question. What is RA 11650? Who are the learners with disabilities covered by the law? And what are the key provisions? Let me start with the basic. RA 11650 is the Inclusive Education Act. Its full title is an act instituting a policy of inclusion and services for learners with disabilities in support of Inclusive Education Act. It was signed into law on March 11, 2022. But here is an important date. The Implementing Rules and Regulations or IRR were officially released on May 9, 2025 through DepEd Memorandum Number 043. This means the law is still in its early implementation phase. We are only about 1 year into full implementation. But what does the IIR provide? It provides detailed operational guidelines for ILRCs. It specifies the roles and responsibilities of each agency. It sets standards for teacher training and assistive technology, and it establishes monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. The purpose of this law is simple but ambitious: to ensure that every learner with disability has access to quality, equitable, and culturally responsive education. So, who are exactly the learners with disabilities under this law? According to Section 4 of RA 11650, LWDs include those with visual impairment, that includes blindness and low vision, those with hearing impairment, deafness or hard of hearing, those with intellectual disability, those with learning disabilities like dysclasia and dyscalculia, those with physical disabilities, including those who use wheelchairs, those with speech or language impairment, those on the autism spectrum, and those with multiple disabilities. This is a broad and inclusive definition. It covers many learners who have historically been left out of the education system. Now, how many learners are we talking about? According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, approximately 5% of Filipino children have disabilities. That is over 2 million learners nationwide. Let me give you specific numbers from DepEd data from school year 2016 to 2017. These are the most recent detailed figures available. A total of 232,975 learners with disabilities were mainstreamed into regular classes. Of these, 19,535 had visual impairment, 13,365 had hearing impairment, and 6,568 had speech or language impairment. Please note that these figures are from 2016 to 2017. The actual numbers today are likely much higher because of better identification and reporting. Now, let me walk you through the 6 key provisions of RA 11650. First, the establishment of Inclusive Learning Resource Centers or ILRCs in every city and municipality. An ILRC is a physical hub located in every city and municipality. It is designed to provide 5 main services. First, assessment and diagnosis of LWDs. This means identifying what specific disability a child has and what support they need. Second, intervention and support services. This includes therapy and remedial instruction. Third, a resource center for assistive devices and learning materials. Schools can borrow these devices for their LWDs. Fourth, technical assistance and training for teachers in the area. And lastly, maintaining a database of LWDs in the jurisdiction. Each ILRC must be staffed by SPED teachers, therapists, and support personnel. Second, the Child Find system to locate LWDs who are not in school. This is a mandatory system to identify and locate LWDs who are not currently in school. Who does it cover? It covers children with disabilities in remote and marginalized communities. It covers those who have never enrolled in school, and it covers those who drop out because of their disability. Why does this matter? Because without identification, there can be no intervention. If we do not know where these children are, we cannot help them. The law requires DepEd in coordination with LGUs and barangays to actively search for these children and bring them into the education system. Third, mandated teacher training on inclusive education. The law requires 3 types of training. First, pre-service training on inclusive education for future teachers while they are still in college. Second, in-service training for current teachers. Third, continuous professional development programs. The law also requires specialized training for SPED teachers and ILRC personnel. The goal is simple. Every teacher should be able to handle a diverse classroom that includes learners with and without disabilities. However, as we will hear from Speaker 3, the reality falls far short of this goal. Fourth, accessible learning materials and assistive technologies. The law requires physical accessibility of school buildings. This means ramps for wheelchairs, accessible toilets, wide doorways, and handrails. The law also requires the provision of assistive technologies. These include braille materials for blind learners, hearing aids for deaf learners, speech generating devices for non-verbal learners, and mobility aids like wheelchairs and walkers. Finally, the law requires accessible learning materials in multiple formats: large print, audio, digital, and simplified versions. Without these, LWDs cannot meaningfully participate in education. Fifth, provision of discrimination against LWDs. The law explicitly prohibits 4 things. First, denying admission to LWDs. Schools cannot say, "We do not accept children with disabilities." Second, segregating LWDs without valid educational reasons. Inclusion means learning alongside peers, not in a separate room. Third, bullying, harassment, or stigmatization of LWDs. And fourth, charging higher fees for LWDs. Violations of these provisions may result in administrative and criminal penalties. And sixth, multi-agency implementation involving DepEd, DOH, DSWD, NCDA, and LGUs. 5 agencies are involved. The Department of Education, or DepEd, is the lead implementing agency. The Department of Health, or DOH, provides medical assessment and intervention. The Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, provides social support and rehabilitation. The National Council on Disability Affairs, or NCDA, handles policy coordination. And the local government units, or LGUs, are responsible for the actual establishment and maintenance of ILRCs. Coordination among these agencies is critical for success, but as we will hear, this coordination is often lacking. Let me summarize what we learned in question 1. First, RA 11650 is the Inclusive Education Act signed in 2022, with the IRR released on May 2025. Implementation is ongoing. Second, LWDs include those with visual, hearing, intellectual, learning, physical, speech, and autism spectrum disorders. Third, over 2 million Filipino children have disabilities. Fourth, the law has 6 key provisions: ILRCs, child find, teacher training, assistive technology, non-discrimination, and multi-agency coordination. With this background, let us now move to question number 2.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Sicoban, for that very informative presentation. And now, please help me welcome our second speaker, Mr. Daniel Oslod B. Ontong, for his discussion on the major challenges in establishing ILRC.
I am Danilo Oslod B. Ontong, and I will answer our second question. What are the major challenges faced by public schools in establishing Inclusive Learning Resource Centers, or ILRC? Based on our research, we have identified 6 major challenges. First, infrastructure, the lack of physical space for ILRCs. Second, personnel, the shortage of trained SPED teachers and therapists. Third, equipment, the lack of assessment tools and assistive devices. Fourth, funding, delayed release and insufficient budget, which is common. Fifth, geographic disparities, the gap between urban and remote areas. And sixth is the coordination, poor communication among government agencies. So let me explain each challenge in detail. Challenge number 1 is the infrastructure. The problem is simple. Many schools have no extra room to turn into an ILRC. What schools call an ILRC is often a makeshift space, a storage room, a borrowed classroom, or a corner of the library. The law requires dedicated physical space for assessment, intervention, and resource storage. But the reality is that most ILRCs operate out of regular classrooms or borrowed spaces. Furthermore, many schools lack basic accessibility features. No ramps, no accessible toilets, no wide doorways for wheelchairs. So without a physical hub, assessment and intervention services cannot be delivered effectively. Challenge number 2 is personnel. There is a severe shortage of trained SPED teachers. There's also a shortage of support professionals, speech therapists, occupational therapists, and psychologists. Let me give you the data. Only 30% of public school teachers have received formal inclusive education training. That means 7 out of 10 teachers have no training at all. In rural areas, the situation is even worse. Many schools have 0 SPED trained staff. One SPED teacher may serve multiple schools, traveling from one town to another. So, let me share a teacher's testimony. A public school teacher from Quezon City said, "Ang hirap po kasi walang training. Gusto ko tumulong pero hindi ko alam paano." So this teacher has the heart. She wants to help, obviously, but she does not have the skills. That is not her fault. That is a systematic failure. So to proceed, challenge number 3 is equipment and assessment tools. The problem is threefold. First, there are insufficient diagnostic and assessment tools. Schools cannot properly identify what disability a child has. Second, there is a lack of intervention materials and therapy equipment. Third, assistive devices are expensive and hard to maintain. Let me give you a concrete example. A SPED teacher from Cebu said, "Isang braille printer lang sa buong division. Kung masira, wala nang magamit." So, to translate that, there's only one braille printer for the entire division. If it breaks, there's nothing for blind students to use. So, Think about that. No? Think about that. One printer for an entire division. So if that printer breaks, blind students in that division, no, have no access to braille materials. No backup, no repair budget, nothing. No? So it is hard. So challenge number 4 is the funding. Let me show you the budget numbers in 2023. The Department of Education inclusive education budget was 1.2 billion pesos. In 2024, it increased to 1.5 billion. In 2025, it is 1.8 billion. So maganda, no? On the surface, this looks good. The budget is increasing. But here is the problem. Experts estimate that to fully fund ILRCs in all 1,488 cities and municipalities, we need between 3 billion and 7.5 billion pesos annually. So, to do the math, our current budget of 1.8 billion covers only 24 to 60% of that estimated need. Furthermore, funds often arrive late at the local level, which is common. And many local government units do not allocate their own funds for ILRCs. So, the result, ILRCs remain understaffed and under-resourced. So, to proceed, challenge number 5 is the geographic disparities. Let me show you a comparison in the National Capital Region, or the NCR. There are 1.8 SPED teachers for every 1,000 learners with a disability. About 80% of ILRCs are operational. In Calabar Zone, there are 1.2 SPED teachers per 1,000 learners with disabilities, with about 65% of ILRCs operational. In Central Visayas, 0.8 SPED teachers, 50% operational. In the Cordillera region, 0.6 SPED teachers, so 45% operational. And in BARM, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, our region, there are only 0.2 SPED teachers per 1,000 learners with disabilities. So, only 15% of ILRCs are operational. So, the reality is clear. A child with a disability in Metro Manila has significantly better access to services than a child in BARM. No? So, this violates the principle of equitable access that the law promises. Challenge number 6 is coordination among agencies. Republic Act 11650 involves 5 agencies: DepEd, DOH, DSWD, NCDA, and the local government units. In theory, this is good because it brings together all the services that the learner with disabilities need. In practice, however, these agencies do not always communicate effectively. Excuse me. There is what we call silo mentality. Each agency works in isolation. There is no clear mechanism for sharing data and resources. Sometimes there is duplication of efforts. Other times there are gaps where no agency takes responsibility. So the result is that LWDs fall through the cracks. No? Learners with disabilities fall through the cracks. No single agency takes full responsibility for ensuring that every LWD receives the service they need. To To address this, no, the IRR released in May 2025 provides clear guidelines. It delineates roles and responsibilities. It requires regular interagency meetings. No? It requires interagency meetings. It calls for a unified database system for LWDs. And it establishes joint monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. However, the IRR is still new, no? So, alam mo ina-expect natin sa bago? Full compliance will take time. The challenge of coordination remains a major barrier to implementation. So, let me summarize, no, the 6 challenges that I discussed. First is infrastructure. No physical space for ILRCs or lack of space. Secondly, is the personnel. Only 30% of teachers are trained and there is a shortage of therapists. Third is the equipment, no? Lack of assessment tools and assistive devices with a maintenance crisis. Fourth is funding. Only 1.8 billion pesos versus an estimated need of 3 to 7.5 billion pesos. Fifth is geographic disparities. Severe gap between the NCR with 1.8 SPED teachers and BARM with only 0.2. So sixth or the last core is coordination. Poor communication among these agencies, DepEd, DOH, DSWD, and the local government units. These challenges are interconnected. You cannot solve infrastructure, no? Basically, you cannot solve infrastructure without funding. So, paano ka magpapatayo kung walang pera? You cannot solve personnel without training. So, anong use ng personnel kung wala namang right amount of training, no? Or the knowledge, the capability. You cannot solve coordination without political will. So, ito na yung part ng mga interagency. So, that would be all for my part. So, now, let us move to the question number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Ontong, for that very fruitful and productive discussion in your presentation. So now, let us have our third and last speaker, Mr. John Algen P. Poblete. Let us all welcome Mr. John Algen Poblete, for he will be discussing the topics about the adequacy of budget, teacher training, and assistive technologies. Let's give him a round of applause.
Resource adequacy, how adequate are the current government budget, training programs for teachers, and availability of assistive technologies across different regions. For the overview, first, financial resources or the government budget, human resources, the teachers and their trainings, material resources, which are the assistive technological equipment. For the first resource, the estimated need for budget ranges from 3 to 7.5 billion pesos annually, which the current budget only covers 24 to 60% of estimated need, which is very low allocation to the BARM. For human resource, only 30% of public school teachers have received formal inclusive education training, and most training programs are short-term, lack of practical or hands-on application, and no standardized national curriculum or inclusive education training. Also, research finding shows that teachers have a positive attitude toward inclusion but lack specific skills. For the assistive technology requirements, for the disability of blind or low vision, needed assistive technological requirement are braille materials, braille printers, screen readers, and magnifiers. For deaf or difficulty of hearing, Hearing aids, FM systems, and signed language interpreters are lacking. For the non-verbal disability speech, generating devices and communication boards are needed. For the physical disability, wheelchairs and walkers, adapted desks are needed. And for learning disability, text-to-speech software and audiobooks are needed.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Sicoban, Sir Untong, and Sir Poblete for your excellent presentation. Let me summarize the key takeaways from our webinar. From our first speaker, we learned that the Republic Act number 11650 is the Inclusive Education Act signed in 2022 with the IRR released in May 2025. So over 2 million Filipino children have disabilities. The law has 6 key provisions, which are the ILRCs, the child find, the teacher training, the assistive technology, the non-discrimination, and also the multi-agency coordination. So from our second speaker, we learned that the 6 major challenges that blocks the ILRC establishments are the infrastructure, the personnel, the equipment, the funding, the geographic disparities, and the coordinations. So only about 30% of teachers are trained, and there is a severe gap between NCR and BARM. And from our third speaker, we learned that the budget covers only 24 to 60% of estimated need. The teacher training is inadequate. So assistive technology is unevenly distributed and maintenance is a major crisis. And with that, based on our research, we offer 6 recommendations. First, that is to increase the annual budget to at least 5 billion pesos. This would cover a larger portion of the estimated need for that implementation. And second, mandate the inclusive education as a core subject in the teacher education, even at the pre-service level. Future teachers should graduate already trained in inclusive practices. Third, establish a national assistive technology maintenance and also a replacement program. Devices should be repaired quickly, not left broken for months or years. Another is we should create a unified LWD database shared by the DepEd, the DOH, the DSWD, and also the LGUs. This would allow better coordination and resource allocation. And fifth, prioritize teacher learning or teacher training and ILRC establishment specific in BARM and other remote regions. So these regions with the greatest need should receive the most support. And last but not the least, we should launch a public awareness campaign in order to combat stigma and discrimination. Many barriers are not physical, they are just in people's mind. Before closing, let me ask one final poll question. After today's webinar, which recommendation do you think is the most urgent? Letter A, increase the budget to 5 million pesos. Letter B, mandate the inclusive education in teacher training. Letter C, fix assistive technology maintenance. Letter D, create a unified LWD database. Or letter E, prioritize remote regions in BARM. Please type your answer in the chat box below. Thank you so much. Thank you for your responses. It is interesting to see the variety of your opinions. This tells us that there is no single solution. We need all of these recommendations working together. As we close, let me leave you with a final thought. We do not need to pity children with disabilities. They do not need our pity. What they need are opportunities. Opportunities to learn, opportunities to grow, opportunity to contribute to our society. Thus, RA 11650 is a law that creates these opportunities. But a law on a paper is not enough. It needs implementations. It needs funding. It needs trained teachers. It needs working devices. And it needs political will. We hope that this webinar helped you understand what are the Republic Act number 11650, the challenges in implementing it, and the gaps in resources. But understanding is only the first step. The next step is action. Whether you become a teacher, a policymaker, a parent, or an advocate, you have a role to play in making inclusive education a reality. And with that, I would like to thank our teacher, Dr. Cecilia Baroga, for her guidance. I thank our participants for their time and attention. And I thank the entire Group D1 team for their hard work. Now, this concludes our webinar. Thank you and good day everyone. I am Jarmela S. Mariga, your MC, signing off.